That's literally where all the money is in the world for like everything. We need RWAs. I think that's going to drive a lot of interest and traction in the space. That's the goal, is anything that can be traded should be traded on chain. DEX volume, number one. NFT volume, number one. Active users, number one. Active wallets, number one. It's just a matter of time. It could be the next big thing.
GM, and welcome back to SolanaFloor. Today we're diving into one of the most exciting and arguably most overlooked areas in Solana, because we're going to unpack Solana's real-world asset, or RWA space. And to break it all down, I'm joined by George Harrap, a DeFi OG, and of course the co-founder of StepFinance, which is the front page of Solana. And I'm really excited to learn more about Step's moves in this growing RWA space, because as you might know, Solana's only had about 3% of the total RWA market share so far. So George, congrats on the news, and thank you for joining me today.
Well, GM, thanks for having me, Jack. It's great to be in the hot seat, but I don't have to do any of the work in the hot seat this time. I just get to sit there and answer questions. This is great. But yeah, look, the big thing is the acquisition that we announced last week of Step acquiring Remora, or Remora Markets. And it's an RWA platform focused on tokenizing stocks and bringing that to Solana. So a lot to unpack from there, but very exciting.
Absolutely. Again, congratulations. And I'm curious why you think RWAs are such an important growth area within the Solana ecosystem at the moment.
There's probably like four answers to that question. But I think, okay, let's start from, what is Solana? Solana is trying to build a financial system, in my opinion. It is, people say it's a state machine, it's a this, it's a that. It's people building predominantly financial apps on chain, DeFi protocols, that sort of thing, non-custodial services, to be able to interact with people and do financial stuff on chain without needing to trust middlemen. Cool, we all understand that. So that means that part of what Solana's trying to do is to do things that the financial system does. Now, we've got that. We've had that for many years now with DEXs and LPs and all sorts of different crazy, options protocols and whatever else. But actually, the largest part, or one of the largest part of where literally all the money in the world is, I think it's measured in quadrillions is derivatives, but certainly trillions is all sorts of other different assets, right? So that could be equities, certainly the bond market, FX, all these sorts of different areas. So these are what we're sort of talking about when we're talking about real world assets. So that's literally where all the money is in the world for like everything. You got real estate, which has another component. Gold is a much smaller component. And hey, maybe one day Bitcoin becomes a big component of that. But the point is that, look, that's where the assets are in the world today. They're in real world assets, all sorts of different definitions of that. But ultimately, if Solana's to compete and be a global state machine and a financial system for the world, then we need RWAs. And I think what you're seeing now is we're just at the start of the RWA sort of onboarding onto certainly Solana, but I think in general for crypto. And it's very exciting. So look, it's gonna happen fundamentally. The question is, who's gonna do it? So it might as well be us.
Absolutely. And now that, StepFinance gone and done this third and arguably most pivotal acquisition, people are talking about buying and integrating tokenized stocks like Tesla and Nvidia, the more popular names that we come across. How do you see this opening the door for new users and traditional investors to start exploring Solana? Do you think it's going to really make them sort of more comfortable with that idea?
Yeah, I think if you are a quote traditional investor now, like if you want to buy a Tesla stock, like you're probably going to use your brokerage or whatever, and that's well established. I think it's really for people which don't have that set up already, right? So it's maybe for, we've got 8 billion people in the world, maybe 1 billion have pretty easy access to the equities markets. And then, other than that, everyone's kind of left to their own devices. So I think number one, it's more of an enabler for peeps there. And look, I think that's going to drive a lot of interest and traction in the space. And we'll sort of see, where that ends up. But ultimately, I think we've started with like treasuries. A lot of Ethereum sort of projects have started with treasuries. We haven't really got that many tokenized stocks platforms at all. There's a few different bond platforms here and there, sort of privatized bond markets and stuff like that. So there's actually a really big scope to bring in a lot of new peeps. And yeah, a lot of new people that never would have had that exposure.
That makes a lot of sense. And what can we expect to be listed then when things do launch? How many stocks? Is it going to be only the biggest ones? Is there a market cap barrier? How do we decide what's going to be there?
Yeah, so I think it's so the Remora team, sort of where they're at, I think, is that we start with the largest tech stocks and then build it out from there based on demand. So like your Nvidias, your Teslas, Microsoft, whatever it might be in the world, and yeah, build it from there, essentially based on demand. And pretty much, anything that is traded in any of the global exchanges around the world will possibly be able to be tokenized. But yeah, Remora team, they'll make that determination, when the time is right. But yeah, ultimately, that's the goal. Is anything that can be traded should be traded on chain.
I like that sentiment, but then people might turn around and say, okay, crypto's 24/7, great, but stocks aren't, stock markets closed. So let's say, it's Friday afternoon, Tesla closes when it's trading at, I don't know, $500 a share. What happens over the weekend to the tokenized asset? Does it stay at 500? Does it fluctuate over the weekend and then, get reset to 500 on Monday when it opens? How does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, there is custody to how Remora works. So fundamentally, if there's one Tesla coin in existence, then there's one Tesla share which is on the books, of Remora and the custodian and so on. So there is fundamentally collateral, that we need to prove reserves. And you're right, stocks only trade, during America hours, right? So what happens on a weekend? So fundamentally, the people which are KYC'd on the Remora platform, they'll be able to mint and redeem just like a stable coin. Now, the current market price will be during trading hours. On weekends, when that's not possible, the token, if it's on chain already, if it's on LP pools and whatever else, I mean, it'll be trading 24/7. It'll have a price. So, people could, if they wanted to buy a token, they could do it there. So if, say, the on-chain price is much higher over the weekend, and then come Monday, there's an opening, and the stocks are trading again, then people would mint new stocks and then sell it for the higher price on chain, arbitrage, right? So fundamentally, that's how it's going to work. The price will only have a real price during trading hours, but other than that, it will be available 24/7 on chain.
Really interesting. Do you expect to see then with some of the more volatile, high growth tech stocks that people will come in and, bring a huge amount of liquidity and trading volume over the weekends to try and arbitrage that?
It could be. I think maybe people will see it as maybe a diversification. Maybe it's I don't know. I don't know. What people will do and how they'll make use of it. To be honest, so it'll be very interesting to see what they do. We've had people come to us and say, "Hey, it maybe operates as a really good collateral, right?" Because okay, if it's the stock market, let's say it's a tokenized S&P index or something, right? Well, that's probably not going to nuke 95% tomorrow, whereas random coins probably will. So, I think as a collateral to be used in lenders or something like that could be very interesting. So yeah, I'm very curious to sort of see, how people interact and what they do.
Absolutely. And would you say then Solana is sort of an ideal place for this to happen, given that, as we mentioned, it's only really had 3% of the total RWA market share so far? And, is that an opportunity that was previously missed, do you think?
Of course. I mean, so when we talk about Solana, right, Solana is now basically number one in pretty much every metric. Okay, so DEX volume, number one. NFT volume, number one. Active users, number one. Active wallets, number one. We saw the report Electric Capital last week, largest developer ecosystem, first time in 8 years that it took that crown from Ethereum, number one. The only metric it's not number one in is TVL, and Ethereum still has an edge there. So the RWA ecosystem, as you say, it's very small on Solana. It's not number one, but I think that that's just another area that you'll see Solana just rocket up in terms of interest and adoption, and maybe you'll see existing protocols that are RWAs on elsewhere. Maybe they should have a Solana strategy. I mean, why is Solana taking off? And we had the Pengu token launch, and it was, I don't know, some crazy number. I think it was 60 million claims or something like that. And it handled it, very well. In terms of the chain itself, not so much the website, but yeah, look, there's people want to be on Solana because it's fast and cheap, fundamentally. The UX for wallets is really good. And there's a whole bunch of different tools that already support that in the rest of the ecosystem, right? So I think that's all of those things can be repurposed to RWAs. RWAs can trade on all the existing platforms that are already there and already have a mind share and a user base, and they have charts and they have integrations of different things, staking, whatever. Like, it just fits straight into what's already there, and what's already there is really good, if not like the number one protocols. Revenue is another one. Solana protocols make the most revenue of anyone else in the whole DeFi world. So yeah, stuff like that, I think it's just a matter of time. So yeah, I think Remora hopefully will be able to pioneer a lot of that.
Speaking of the user experience, where are people going to be able to access this new sort of wave of RWAs? Are we going to go to StepFinance? Should we go to Remora? Where do we interact with these assets?
Yeah, well, so Step is a portfolio dashboard, the core product. So we are showing every token which is associated with a wallet, tokens, but also LPs, perp dexes, lenders, NFT, all of the different stuff that happens on chain. So this will be no different. So yes, you'll be able to see anything that is happening with your wallet on chain. You'll be able to see that on Step. But in terms of where people access it, well, it could be from any of these platforms I've mentioned, right? Existing dexes. There'll be people LPing with these tokens in AMM pools, maybe concentrated AMM pools as well. So there'll be an APY associated with a Microsoft. What I really like back in the day. So Terra, even though Terra is like, okay, it's not so good, but back in the day, before it blew up, there was a thing called Mirror, and they had tokenized stocks. And essentially, TVL grew rapidly. Everyone really loved it. It had like 200% APYs, like Microsoft pools or Tesla or whatever else. And it was a very easy user experience. Wallets worked, all that sort of stuff. So from a product perspective, like, that was great in terms of accessibility, in terms of like interesting. Like, of course, like why would I buy a Microsoft share someone else? Right? I get my MSFT at 200% APY in this USDC pool. Yeah, so I think it opens up the door for options like that, and maybe that's how people interact, with this thing. Could be, we'll sort of see.
And going back to something you mentioned earlier, you said it's at the beginning at least largely going to be for people who already interact with crypto, but then maybe we'll see TradFi people coming in. I've heard recently a lot of people in the crypto space say things like, screw TradFi, we don't need those guys, we don't want to repeat the mistakes that they've made. Do you have any hot takes on that front in terms of bridging that gap between TradFi and DeFi on Solana?
I'll certainly screw TradFi. Like I think I said in our last interview, like if they were the smart money, they would have been in crypto 10 years ago, but they're not. So they're probably the dumb money. But a lot of them are. But I think in terms of being a bridge, yeah, probably it is. Having a real ownership of a Tesla's share is obviously better if you want to be a shareholder of Tesla. But if you want price exposure, then maybe there's more accessible ways to do that on chain. And maybe that opens the world up to more people. So fundamentally, I think that it's actually good for TradFi, because any dollars that are rocking around on chain doing stuff, and this goes for any RWA, whether it's tokenized treasuries or whatever, all of that has some component of it that's also held in the TradFi system. So there's no getting away from that. And you can't just, crypto already is its own little thing that's separate from TradFi. This thing, RWAs, is literally TradFi, but on chain. So it's not like they can be separate. Like, they're literally tied at the hip. So it's beneficial. I think there's no real sort of downsides for not, having more bridges to those two worlds. And the more the merrier. It benefits both parties. Everyone's happy. Basically makes more things accessible to more people.
Certainly. And thinking of the near future, then it is a bull market, granted, and things can be pretty difficult to predict in these market conditions. But on a personal note for you, what would have to happen in the RWA space on Solana over the next, let's say, 12 months for you to say we've achieved something good, or this is a success story?
I think that 3% number you mentioned, like, certainly, getting that up there. And I think maybe, so people look at TVL as a core metric, and is TVL a meme? Is it not? Yeah, sometimes it is. I think in this particular scenario, I think it's very relevant. So number going up there, I think for RWAs is important, and that would be a success, is is that number going up? Is TVL growing? Is there more people storing more value on chain through this thing? That's what you'd ultimately want to see. Is the market cap big enough? Is there enough people that care about it? But yeah, I think a success is just as long as TVL growth is solid, user base growth is solid. And the cool thing about crypto is everything is data. Like the whole thing is data. So you can see real time how many holders, how many traders, how many people doing this, what are the open positions, what's the liquidations like on lenders for RWAs. So everything is real time, which if you operate in the TradFi world, like literally how do they work? You send a report to some government agency filling out a form once every 3 months, and then they go and publish a number, and that number's probably entirely wrong. It is. The formulas of which they calculate everything, inflation being a great example, not public, not open source, not including a whole bunch of things, healthcare, cost of groceries, cost of education, all of that's removed from inflation numbers since like 1980. So it's not publicly verifiable or open. So it's actually not an accurate representation of real markets. And markets need information, and they're very good at finding the truth for things. We see that with the prediction markets of the last election as well, right? So they were correct way ahead of time of anyone else. So markets have a way of finding that truth. And I think having these kind of assets on chain just makes it easier to sort of see all of that very juicy and interesting data.
Is that then, in your mind, the biggest unlock that RWAs can bring to the Solana ecosystem? That larger number of data points that we can work with,
I think
or is there something else?
I think probably what you'll see people like ourselves, of course, so it's SolanaFloor, as well as other people from random funds or whatever. They'll have all of this data at their fingertips, and then they'll start talking about it and they'll start writing about it. So I think it'll be like a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing, that once it gets some attention and momentum, then it will be quite hard to stop. And it might be one of these new narratives which comes up, right? Every year, oh, we got a new narrative in the thing. RWAs, they're not exactly new, but they haven't really taken off massively as everything else has on crypto. So it could be the next big thing.
Could be the next big thing, and we will be following along with the developments of all RWA related activity on SolanaFloor at SolanaFloor. Is there anything else that we should pay attention to, George, over the next 12 to 24 months, specific to RWA, specific to StepFinance, specific to Remora?
Well, I would say, look, Remora is our third acquisition. We're very excited with this. I think this is a new foray in a new area for us. We have an excellent team with Remora. And they're currently going through the procedures and stuff to hopefully go live by Q1. So for us at Step, it's going to be I think a very good thing for the next year. SolanaFloor was one of our acquisitions. We've now turned that into the largest media company in all of Solana, if not competing there for the top rungs of crypto. We've got other sort of initiatives, Crossroads as well. With the conference, we've got All Stars going on. We've got 7,000 people a month going to our meetups, 100 meetups a month. And we've got the Step Portfolio Dashboard, which is one of the most used products in crypto. So we have all of these different arms now of sort of an organization. I think it's going to be a very exciting year because a lot of these different things are complementary to each other. So yeah, 2025, let's go.
Absolutely. Okay, for the audience then that may be watching this for the first time, maybe coming to SolanaFloor for the first time, where should they go to stay updated on all the Remora and RWA related updates in the next 6 months?
Yep. So go to Remora Markets on Twitter. You can search them, follow them. All the latest updates will be there. Obviously, follow SolanaFloor. We'll have the website and other stuff. We're currently working on things like the transparency page and proving reserves and stuff like that. So hopefully that'll be ready in the next month or two. But yeah, definitely the Twitter's the best place. Join the Discord. And yeah, of course, follow SolanaFloor for all the news.
Absolutely. See you next time on SolanaFloor. George, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jack. Pleasure to be here.